Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today I've got the latest in the Smith Wesson Bodyguard series, the Bodyguard 2.0 chambered in 380. Please don't forget to check out our website. Go to our affiliates page. You'll find discount codes for things like Mantis Axe and Core belts. Link to that cool little bore light that we use for lighting up the barrels. Use those links. It will often save you money, never will cost you any additional money, and helps the channel. And please consider supporting the channel on Player, formerly Utreon, where we can do some types of videos that are no longer allowed on YouTube. So this is an evolution of the Bodyguard that originally came out in 2014. And the first one that came out in 2014 was probably one of the most hideous pistols I have ever shot. The trigger was long, heavy, stacked a lot. It was a very bad trigger, and it wasn't even that reliable. It was pretty much a horrible gun. Didn't end up keeping it, got rid of it. Then they came out more recently with the M&P Bodyguard 380, and fundamentally it's the same gun. The only thing they did is they improved the trigger. They vastly improved the trigger on that. But other than that, it's the same chassis, same functional, same safety. Everything else about it was the same. Now there's this, and this has really upped the game. It's upped the game in two ways. First off, there's a 10-round magazine as opposed to the 6-round that the original Bodyguard came with, and then you see this 12-round magazine. And when you put the 12-round magazine in it, it doesn't make it all that big. So what you've got now is a deep conceal 380 that's got 12 rounds and not that much bigger footprint than the original one. But if we go apples to apples, we go with the flush mag on this one and the flush mag on this one, you're picking up an extra 4 rounds, but you're not really picking up that much extra space. So let's kind of do that quick comparison. So I'll set them next to each other, and you can see that, so what I've got here is the new one. The Bodyguard 2.0 is here on this side. So if I set them side by side, you'll see that the original Bodyguard was a 1/4 inch shorter. So 5.5 for the new one and 5.25 for the other one. So from this you can see that the new one, which is here in the back, is a little bit taller. Not much taller. However, I'm going to have to use my handy caliber to tell you how much taller, because according to Smith Wesson, this one is shorter. And it's quite obviously not the case. Now they may have used the spec with the pinky extender mag on the other one, but let's figure out just how much it really is shorter. So 0.2 inches taller for the new one versus the old one with the flush mags. Which, of course, if you're really focused on deep conceal carry, you're going to use the flush mags. You're not going to use the pinky extender. And from a thickness perspective, I could tell you they're the same thickness, and you'd probably buy it because they're that close. The original is 0.75 inches, and the new one is 0.88. So you're talking a little over 1/10 of an inch thicker. Nothing that's going to make a difference in whether or not you can carry it. The dimensions that are different aren't going to make a difference. But there is one statistic that is significantly different that is going to make a difference, and it's going to go a different way than you might expect. The old one is heavier, probably because of the Hammer fire control group as opposed to Striker on the new one. So the old one's 11.9 ounces, and the new one is 9.8 ounces. This is LCP territory, and from a size perspective, it's only a little bit bigger than guns like that, and it's only just a hair heavier than guns like that. But it's actually got quite a nice trigger, and with one very important exception that I think will go away, this was dead reliable. The only exception we had from a reliability standpoint is when we fully loaded the 12-round mag. Whether we barneyed it, had a round in the chamber or not, the first round did not want to chamber correctly. Whether you used the slide stop slide release, which at the very beginning of the range session really didn't work at all, as the range session wore on, the slide stop slide release did a good job of releasing it, or whether you slingshotted it, the loading of that top round was not reliable. And I also did show you how difficult this magazine is to get that last round in. But what I will say is by the end of the range session, the 12-round mag was working correctly, even if you fully loaded it when you slingshotted it. So what I would say is that's break-in, and I give any gun a break-in period. and it broke in quickly. It broke in while we were at the range and worked correctly. So the 12 round magazine thing, I think, is going to be something you'll encounter in the very beginning, but get some rounds downrange, which you're going to do anyway, and that should go away. So unless that problem comes back, I'm truly not going to hold that against this gun. There's only a few other things that have changed. The texture is a little different, but it's fundamentally similar. It's kind of that sandpapery, but it's not really abrasive. It's not going to chew you up. You got front and rear serrations now. Of course, the significant change is its striker, which is going to affect the trigger, and I'll get to that in a second. And the sights are different and somewhat improved. So the front sight is much better. It's a tritium with a ring around it, so it's easy to see. Nice front sight, whereas the original had a blackout front and rear. The rear is a blackout, and I'm not a fan of blackouts. And there's kind of a balancing act between the amount of space in the back. So when you look through the rear sight to the front, if there's the right amount of space, you can still use a blackout sight and still do bullseye type accuracy. This one's almost got a little bit too much space. It was kind of hard to center this. So what I found with it is at short distances, I could bullseye and kind of run multiple rounds through the same hole. But as the target went further down range, this got harder to keep on target. You could stay combat effective for the purpose of what something like this is for. You would put the rounds in an effective location, but this is not going to be a long-range bullseye type shooter. But it is good enough for the purpose of what this is designed for, which is deep concealed carry. So let's talk about the trigger, because that's a big difference. Number one, it's a flatty. Number two, as I mentioned, it's striker. So it has the inertial toggle. There's a little bit of a hitch, but nothing that really is significant as you begin the take-up. There's a little bit of take-up, then you're on a wall. It's a crisp wall, but it's a really nice, light 4.1 pound wall. Reset is truly all the way out. I mean, that would be all the way out, but it's close enough to all the way out that don't worry about trying to do a short reset on this, because it's not a short reset gun. Now I have to cycle it. And that's another thing I'll mention that's different. So I'll do the take-up again. And again, it's a crisp wall. It's a defined wall. You can feel where it is, but 4.1 pounds, so it's actually quite a nice trigger. The original one was long. Well, this is the middle ground. So this is the Bodyguard 380, the M&P version, and they improved the trigger. But it's still kind of a heavy-ish and longish, and then it breaks all the way at the back. And there is no concept of a short reset, because this is you get a false reset if you're not careful. This is a double action only, and so you've got a 9-pound pull. The one before this, the generation before this, was even heavier, and I don't have that anymore, but it was probably 12 plus. But one important thing, it has double strike capability. That's one thing that some people look for, and it's a hammer gun. So you're cocking it fully during the cycle, and you can just keep pulling it until the round goes off or you decide to give up on it. Most striker guns don't have that ability. If I pull the trigger, it fires, and then the trigger's dead. That's not a problem. That's typical of the striker design. There's a few out there that do have double strike in the striker, but the majority of them don't. And so I don't consider that a negative. So overall, I've seen them incrementally take this from this series, the gun they called the Bodyguard, from almost the most horrible thing I ever used, to actually a decent little gun for the intended purpose, to a very nice gun for the intended purpose. Other than that 12-round magazine thing that did go away through the range session, it worked flawlessly. And that's not something I can say for the LCP Max that it compares to. And the only other thing that went on with this, and I'm not going to blame it the fault of the gun, it's this size. My hand completely engulfs this thing. And as a result, trying to get the finger out there and pull the trigger, it was hard to shoot this well without pulling low left. That's not a defect in the gun. That's just it's so small. And if you've got large or very large hands, I've got large hands, Striker has even larger hands, you're going to have, Hammer has even larger hands. You're going to have a little trouble with shooting this well and keeping it positioned and getting your hand where it belongs. But again, that's not a defect in the design of this gun. That's the nature of the beast with something this tiny. That's just kind of how these things are. And I've had that problem with other tiny little guns like this. If you take that out of the picture, this gun has worked very well compared to many of the other tiny little guns like this that I've had. And I found it easy to shoot well, at least with the trigger doing its job well. The last thing that, of course, might be of interest to you when trying to decide whether you want this or not is the MSRP. So the MSRP is $449 on this, which is actually pretty reasonable for as well as this functions and the capacity. And I'm seeing them out there for around $399 at the moment. So you can get this relatively inexpensively. One last thing before I close out. Somebody in the comments at the first look had asked about the comparison to the Glock 42. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I'm just going to put them side by side so that you can see roughly the same height. Glock is a little bit longer, and it's definitely thicker. So it's smaller than the Glock 42, and it actually, in my opinion, has a better stock trigger than the Glock 42. Also want to take a moment and show you the internals, because that has changed, and if you've got one of the original ones, you're probably curious about the internals. So you do have to pull the trigger. You lock it back on this one, flip the lever down. You do have to pull the trigger. It doesn't have the little lever that a lot of the M&Ps do, but you'll see it's well constructed. Nice rear rails, nice front rails. They're kind of dual, so there's a rail here, a gap, and a rail there, but they're nice solid metal. Of course, it's a striker fire control group instead of a hammer, but it's well constructed and well machined, which is quite typical of Smith Wesson. They've kind of got the machining game down. Tiny little baby recoil spring. The slide is well machined and clean. There's your drop safety plunger. Everything's just clean and well machined. Of course, there's not a lot going on here. And then on the barrel, of course, it's conventional rifling, but it's well machined, clean, no chattering tool marks or anything else. It's well done rifling, and it does have kind of a strange-ish feed ramp. It's kind of short and it's smaller, and it's kind of machine polished. I'll turn it around this way. So it's not a mirror finish, but it is more polished than a lot of feed ramps I see. And it's, again, the entire structure and finish of the barrel is well done. Putting it back together is just as easy as getting it apart. Slide the recoil spring in, line it back up. And then one thing I will mention, if you get the version with the thumb safety, which this isn't, but there is a thumb safety available on it, it'll sit back here, and it's a little bit better designed than the original one, which the original one kind of acted a little bit clunky. It's a little bit better designed, but I haven't actually had one because this doesn't have it. But if you do get it, it'll be ambi. There'll be a thumb safety on either side. That is the only ambi feature on this. It would be the thumb safety would be on either side. So overall, and there's a witness hole, so you can look for the chamber to be loaded. You'd see the brass or the nickel, depending on what type of round you've got in it. And on that point, from an ammo perspective, it ate whatever we fed it. We did it some Federal Hydroshock. It worked properly, and assorted range ammo, Winchester and Blazer, it just worked. Other than that 12-round magazine thing that went away, it didn't exhibit any ammo sensitivity or issues with hollow points, to which, of course, it's a defense gun. That's really what you're going to end up running in it. So beyond that, I think Smith & Wesson may have done this one very well. I think this is going to turn out to be quite popular, and I think this will take off, unlike the original one. Beyond that, if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click that bell up there to be notified if you do. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Rumble, Player. We're pretty much everywhere. And thank you. Full 10-round mag, closed slide. Now I'm going to cycle it. And then I'm going to Barney it. Now we'll test it. Full 12-round mag, empty chamber. So the 12-round mag is difficult to get to see. Now I'll cycle it. cycled, the mag stayed in. Now I'm going to top off the mag. I'll probably need the Lula. No, able to top it off that time. And a little bit easier to put in. See if it works.